line with music, we're gonna pay homage to an absolute legend that left us very recently. So we wanted to start off this episode saying our sincerest condolences to the family of Earl Simmons, more commonly known as DMX. Dark Man X. Dog Man X, in case you didn't know, because I didn't know that until today. I did a bit of research. So yeah, that's the brother we are going to revere and pay homage to. And I think it is right to start off with some bits I got from the internet, do you know what I'm saying? Because I want to do the biography properly, do you know what I'm saying? Because it's like off the top of the head, it's like, do you get what I'm saying? It's a little bit.
I'd also like to preface this conversation by saying, I haven't been the biggest DMX fan. Not even to say anything about his music, it wasn't great. What it is just simply that I didn't take the time to listen and appreciate his music in its entirety. I think, my just general like sort of understanding and like my listening of hip hop was from, a lot of it was from like mid 2000s to late 2000s, like from that point on. And then anything before that came afterwards, where I would discover it and people were talking about it, and it was like, okay. So, I knew the name DMX. I'd heard like a couple of his songs. Like one thing I knew when I was like understanding and like, learning more about hip hop was like his voice was like iconic. There was no other person that really came on a track like him.
I think it can even be expanded to the fact the whole DMX Rough Riders aesthetic, which we're gonna get into in a lot more detail, is in itself iconic.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? What's up?
The mic, bro.
Oh, I can't help that, man. Allow me. What I was going to say, in terms of that aesthetic, is like, that's become a staple of hip-hop, particularly gangster rap. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm going to start by reading out this little excerpt from the biography. Following the deaths of Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G., DMX took over as the undisputed reigning king of hardcore rap. He was that rare commodity, a commercial powerhouse with artistic and street credibility to spare. His rapid ascent to stardom was actually almost a decade in the making, which gave him a chance to develop the theoretical image that made him one of rap's most distinct personalities during his heyday. Everything about DMX was unremittingly intense, from his muscular tattooed physique, gruff barking delivery, which was perfect match for his trademark lyrical obsession with dogs. I'm not going to continue reading this, but just the fact I started with that, and that's what I meant in terms of his whole aesthetic. The entirety of his aesthetic was literally iconic. The bald head, the dungarees at times, the shirtless, like the muscular physique, like everything about X was just tough. But you gotta put that in the context of who Earl Simmons, because we're dealing with a human being now. As much as we love X's music, we're dealing with someone who had to battle demons, and that's not a mark against X. That's literally the zeitgeist that he was brought up in. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we get into DMX, Earl Simmons, the man.
Okay.
So DMX was born December 18th, 1970 to Joe Barker and Arnett Simmons, who became pregnant with him when she was 19 years old. So there was conflicting reports as to where he was born. Some say it was Baltimore, some say it was Mount Vernon, and yeah, you know what I'm saying. So basically, at a young age, his mother moved him to the infamous School Street projects in Yonkers. So that's why the association with Yonkers comes in for DMX, because he moved there as a child. So if you see the Locks now, or D Block, as they're more commonly known, so Jadakiss, Styles P, Sheik Loach, they're from Yonkers as well originally. So that's how they got the Rough Riders connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So obviously, he spent most of his time learning how to rob.
Okay. I mean, I wasn't aware of the group at the time, innit? But like the rappers that you mentioned, I knew them.
Yeah, so that's how the Rough Rider thing came about. But to go back into DMX's own personal history, is that he grew up in a broken home.
Right.
And I've said this off air, I'm going to say it on camera now, on air, that there's billions, millions of DMXs, both in the United States, UK, everywhere in the world where we are positioned in ghettos, which is by design, by the way. There's a million stories of people like DMX who was hooked on drugs from about 13 years old. And some of that personal trauma affected him in his music. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. So I think it's important to preface the conversation in remembering X with this isn't a perfect man. But that's not a knock against him. it just shows you how far you can reach no matter what you're battling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think I need to start with my own personal journey with how I came to know DMX, and that's through my father's music collection. It's kind of a shame that I wasn't able to bring any albums with me that I had. I didn't get it. Yeah, but I couldn't find any at home, innit, for X. So it's a shame. It's a shame. I really wanted to lay them out on the table. But his first 5 albums are classics. They're classics. Like, I'm going to go through them in order, and I want to get them right.
Do you know what it is? Because I actually took the time out to listen to Flesh on My Flesh, Blood on My Blood.
Which is his second one, right?
Is that the second one? On Spotify, it's listed as his first one.
Yeah, no, because the first one is Dark and Hell is Hot, which has Rough Riders anthem and You're Gonna Be Killers, Get At Me Dog. That all that stuff is on his first album.
Okay. That's interesting then, because when I heard that album, and at the time I was assuming it was his first album, I thought like from early this guy had it, like his whole sort of persona and his whole like how he jumps on the track and like everything about him that we know as DMX, it was so. I think he came out 98. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
yeah, he came out 98. Yeah. What happened was he released his first 2 albums in the same year, so he was one of the first, if not the first, I might be mistaken on it, to go. I think it's platinum, #1 in the same year with 2 albums.
Oh, so even then that's the thing where you could say
those 2 albums came out in the same year.
He established himself early, like he was at 27 at the time, so like I think he had time to really. I mean, obviously I don't know his background like that, but like he had the time to
hone his craft,
find his voice and deliver. And that album itself was hard.
That's what it is, because he spent the decade previously from 17 rapping.
Okay.
So obviously he's still in the streets at the same time,
right.
But he's spent the decade rapping. So there's the tune by LL Cool J, Redman, Method Man, Cannabis. It's a legendary song. It's called 4321. Okay. That's X's first big feature. That was in 97. Mm-hmm. It was an introduction track, because obviously Redman and Meth were huge 90 stars.
Right.
LL was a legend.
Right.
Like, self-proclaimed GOAT, and many believe him, because the work for the past 10 years proved it.
Right.
So to be on a song with them legends at the time is like, who are these two? Because there's 2 of them in it. Cannabis and DMX were the 2 upstarts. Right. Like, to these 2 youths to get on this song, that's crazy, because they got legends on this song basically, or superstars and legends. So X showed that. Then he had a bunch of other guest verses, and you got to remember at the same time the Murder Inc. thing was coming about. The original Murder Inc. was J, Ja Rule, and X.
Oh.
Do you get it? And they were all doing underground songs at this time. So this is like late 90s. I think it might have even been 98. So X and Hove had a rapport from there.
Yeah.
So if there's probably a freestyle you've seen on YouTube where they're going back and forth, like it's a tour. It's the Def Jam tour. And
I don't think I've seen that.
And they're like kind of battling.
Maybe I've seen it like once, like because I remember just going through. I don't know if I was watching a documentary or something that like they were talking about like a famous freestyle or something, and then like I just went on YouTube and tried to search it up. So I might have seen it, but yeah, that's something then. That he would be on a track with like legends, and then a year later come on and release 2 albums.
Yeah. So the first 5 albums are It's Dark and Hell is Hot. Hell is Hot. Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood. And there was X, The Great Depression, and Grand Champ. Those all went platinum.
Hard.
They all went platinum.
When was the last release?
His last release?
Yeah, like what year?
He's meant to release something before he just passed.
Okay.
But the last thing he put out was 2012. Because obviously the end of his career was plagued with legal troubles. Obviously beforehand he'd gone jail. The reason why he wasn't able to put out music till 27 because he'd been in and out of jail, and his longest stretch he came out mid to late 90s. I don't remember the exact year because I'm not reading off my phone for the entirety of this thing.
Right.
But that's the context I did some research on before, and I kind of knew already. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think it's important when remembering X is we know exactly what we're remembering. We're remembering the gruff, the harsh lyricism, on top of in his heyday, on top of the fact that he could do other songs as well. He wasn't just X doing the whole gangster rap thing. What these want from her? I know you know that song.
I know that one.
Which is like a little bit playful, a little bit, kind of a bit disrespectful, kind of.
Bro, there's one song on Flesh of My Flesh that I heard, and I think definitely like if I was younger and you know I'm more discovering hip hop on a just like a innocent kind of thing and I'm just listening to it, I'd have been like, yo.
Yeah.
But when I heard this one, it was like it's like hard, but like I couldn't run it like now in it. But let me find the song because like when I heard it, I thought, yo.
But yeah, that's what I think we need to be remembering is that the impact he gave us ever a style. Because a lot of rappers are DMX's son. And you might...
What? Okay, first of all, the song's called It's All Good, innit?
I think I know
that one is, yeah.
It's Brazy. I think I know that song.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know that song. I think that's
he says a lot of B, you know, the B word a lot.
Yeah, I
like
think that was kind of the
words.
Vernacular back then. That was the kind of dialect. So
yeah.
I'm not excusing the behaviour. Not excusing the behaviour. It's just literally what it is, isn't it? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
but no, what you was even gonna say? So, I guess, who would you specifically say he sort of birthed from his music?
Ooh, I think 50 has a clear DMX influence. You might not be able to hear it, but vernacular wise, just the straight tough talking gangster. Proper, you can hear a lot. Ja Rule has a lot of his hardcore stuff to thank through DMX. He worked directly with DMX.
That makes sense.
It was even a thing where people said, you are trying to sound like DMX and Tupac. And not even just the sound, the whole dress, the whole look was very... and even DMX, at the start of his career, was accused of biting Tupac. The bald head, the tats, like... which isn't necessarily his fault, but...
When did... what year was it that Tupac...
Tupac died 96.
6.
Tupac died 96. Late 96. Biggie died early 97. So the quick turnaround.
Yeah.
And Biggie died in LA.
Right, yeah.
Pac died in Vegas after a Mike Tyson fight.
Right. Yeah.
That whole casino thing, the MGM Grand, when they rushed my man. And that's who they think killed him. I don't know who killed him, but a lot of things don't make sense. Because I've done a little bit of research into Pac's murder. A lot of stuff don't make sense. I'm not gonna divulge everything on camera, but what I will say is that X comes out of the lineage of hardcore NY hip hop. Do you get what I'm saying? Right. That's the lineage we're talking about. Right. He probably grew up listening to Rakim, LL. Probably was influenced by Meth and Wu, Public Enemy, Chuck D in terms of not so much content, but how to rap, delivery, Cool G rap. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what shaped X into the MC that he'd be. But I think when we're talking about X as well, we need to talk about his struggles in the sense of how he was used as a vessel. And I say in the instrumentality of God was put into DMX.
That was a part when I was listening to the album as well, because the last track, the first part was like a prayer from him to God, and then, you know, it was sort of almost, the rest of the song was sort of almost him. I think it was either him talking as somebody else to God, or just like him talking to God himself.
It's probably him talking to God.
Probably just him talking to God. But like the way it was sounding, it was almost like like the way you said it, like he was a vessel for somebody, a vessel for. What was you're saying he's a vessel for? What?
I was saying he's a vessel. He was God's vessel, but you see, when people are born again Christians, and they usually get that thing after, he was put during his struggles to prove to people you don't have to be born again to save people. Do you get what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah.
I see it through that. I see it as he's going through his struggle, and he's a lesson to all of us that despite, even if you're going through it currently and you're battling, you can still be a positive person. You don't have to let your own vices plague you. Does that make sense?
Right.
So that's what I got from X. And obviously there's a series on 3 of his albums called Damien. Damien 1, Damien 2, Damien 3.
Okay.
Which is conversations with the devil. We get kind of spooky about the devil because we think it's like, I'm not going to get into it fully, but what I will say is that I think X used the imagery of the devil and God because we as black people understand it. That's something that theology, a lot of us either understand or think we understand. Do you get what I'm saying?
Okay.
So I think to talk that language, to talk about evil and higher power, because he's not talking about no pitchfork devil under the ground. In my opinion, this is what I got from it. He's talking about the evils that control particular subsections of society. Do you get what I'm saying?
So almost like there's not like a personified version of the devil. It's more just like I don't know the word for it, but essentially what you're saying is like it's not like the stereotypical image of the devil. It's more just like the things that make up the vices that make up what a devil would entail. Characteristics, yeah.
It goes back to the point where the legendary Dr. Khalid Muhammad said that heaven and hell are states of mind. You don't have to necessarily agree with that premise, because I know everyone's got their different faith, so I'm not telling you to agree with that premise. But I'm saying that they're states of mind, states of being, like, and they can be experienced on earth. Do you get what I'm saying? So I'm not necessarily telling people to adhere to that concept, but I think that's the premise that X was going with. Not saying he's not very religious or Christian, but I think that's what he was getting at, speaking to our people in a way that they can understand. Does that make sense? Kind of in a similar way, Marcus Garvey used religion and faith to get people to understand the whole race first thing, to get the thing of, we need to be unified, let's use it through religion. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, even better example, Elijah Muhammad used Islam in that sort of way. He didn't make the Islam that's traditional, because that don't speak to black people. You need to make a Islam that can speak to the condition of the people you're trying to reach. Does that make sense? So it's not the same elaborate level with X, but I think he was trying to do something similar. And I could be wrong. That's just what I got from it.
Okay. But so that was early, like his first album, did you say?
Yes, I think it's in his first 3 albums, or that the third Damien might be on Grand Champ, and there was X. So every one of these albums had hits, like, and there was X, like every single one had hits that like Party Up.
Which one for you was like the standout that you personally yourself would be like, yeah, that's X?
What, that's X? Either X gonna give it to you, or I think he hates it. Like, if you see an interview with X, he said, I don't like the song Stop, Drop, Open Up, Shop. He don't like that song because he thinks it's too simple. He don't like the song, but I think that's quintessential X as well. But I think the best song that he wrote is either Slippin', Damien, or
Slippin'. That's the one I heard still. That
Slippin' is a
nice.
brilliant
That
song.
was nice. That was really nice.
Slippin's, I think, is his best written song. And then I really like, as a personal gangster rap favorite, Get At Me, Dog. Cut.
That was, I might have heard that one as well.
It's on the first album, and I'll see if I can play it in terms of the audio.
Okay, I didn't hear it, but it, yeah.
Nah, I'm gonna play a bit of it still. You're gonna have to cut this.
Wait, let me play it, because I'll play it on the speaker
Yeah,
and you can hear it.
This guy is,
You with me? Get the bitches now to make the crowd. When it's all we transform.
Optimus Prime. Nah, I think it's like in his top tier of X songs. Yeah, sorry to shout. I think it's in the top tier of X songs for the simple fact that it explains exactly what he has to do. It explains that I don't want to do this, but I've been put in a position where I have to.
Yeah.
And I think it says more about the conditions that created DMX than DMX himself.
Well, yeah, so, like, talk about his conditions, like, as much as you know, like, what was it that he had to go through, and why did that, like, shape his music?
What, like, on a personal or on a societal? Because
I mean, what can you get into that's, like, that will explain it the most? Because
I would say in terms of personal, it was a thing where he came up in a broken home, which is a common thing for us, unfortunately. And he, I think it was either uncle or someone he thought was a friend introduced him to crack at 13.
Yeah.
So, do you know what I'm saying? I've spoken about this before, the lack of male role models and that stuff. Positive male role models. But to take it societal, to take it bigger, large scale picture, I think the failures of certain movements in America particularly, let's say stuff like the civil rights and stuff, created the conditions that now exist in the American ghettos. Their failures to focus on economics and only dealing with civil rights as lunch counters and integrating was a failure. We can now say this because we have enough evidence to prove that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that black leadership brass, that bourgeois, Negro bourgeoisie, they made those decisions not thinking 50 years in the future or even 30 years in the future, because that was the 60s.
Yeah.
X was born in 1970. So X grew up in Nixonite, Reaganite world of cutbacks of the legislation that was supposed to be protected.
And it's New York, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, nah, them times, New York specifically, it's...
But it's all around America because it's the crack epidemic.
Oh, yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and the way it was pushed in the media, particularly during the Reagan era, because he made it a focus of his administration. Because the war on drugs was started by Nixon. It was announced by Nixon, sorry. But Reagan created the further funding and push for it. Do you get what I'm saying? And vamped up the police. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the social historical context that's gone into the making of a DMX.
Okay.
And the millions of other DMXs that are around the world. And that's where I said that's why I take it back to the civil rights era, because that's where they failed. Because economic power is the basis of all other power. It's resources, economics, land. If you know what I'm saying?
Right. What, in terms of then the legacy that he's left, like, how do you think it's, because the outside that you wanted to mention as well, like, obviously, like, his content is a product of him just developing his talent, but then alongside, having to go through the struggles in his life. What sort of legacy has he left behind that can shape the generation that we're in now?
X's legacy is one of triumph and tragedy. It's a legacy that needs to be looked at in its totality. It needs to be looked at as it's not all positive, but it's not all negative. Does that make sense? We must understand that we shouldn't glorify all of what X was rapping about, but appreciate the talent he left behind. It's like Biggie, because I get in that sick spot about Biggie, because obviously Biggie's one of my favourite rappers of all time.
Right.
But I'd be a liar, I'd be an absolute dishonest human being to say that Biggie's lasting legacy is entirely positive. That's a lie. It's like what he rapped about, his personal stuff, what he was rapping about, the effect he had on, like, let's say Lil Kim, for example. That's very problematic. Do you know what I'm saying? And I feel like, as I hate to use this word, but somewhat conscious black men, I don't like throwing that word around. But I'll say aware, because we're aware of how this thing is pushed as agenda.
Right.
That gangster rap era was an agenda that needs to be put into context as well of X's legacy of, despite his talent shining through, there was the agenda put up to disrupt the community.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
Because Afrocentric, black-centered hip-hop was a thing in the early 90s. And it was at one point more popular than gangster rap. Because gangster rap started in the 80s, like in terms of the West Coast. Because there was real hip-hop from, like, Grandmaster Flash and them, man.
Right.
I'm not sure if you heard the song. Don't push me,
cause I'm
close
bro.
to
Yeah.
yeah. Which is, if you listen to the words, that's detailing the conditions
Yeah,
of the ghetto, innit?
Yeah, like, even the video, like, I remember seeing it, and It was like a lesson. I can't remember what lesson
It felt weird,
it was.
didn't it? Because like it's a happy beat. It's like
Yeah. And he's all kind of, he's not like happy in the video, but he's kind of just like
but
that, and he's kind of, but
it's like it's the flow like of the 80s. Everyone rap like that.
yeah. But the rest of the video showed the conditions they were living in, and it wasn't actually like a happy sight.
So yeah, that's the conscious side of hip hop has been in it. That conscious side of hip hop has been in hip hop from its inception.
Yeah.
From its literal birth. That's where it's come from. It's its genesis.
Right.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Right.
So, what was pushed by a particular group when they started to control hip hop was negative portrayals of blackness. Because that negative portrayal of blackness enabled a justification of more. You see all the stuff that's currently going on with, what are you going to say?
No, carry on.
Yeah, with state-sponsored violence. State-sponsored genocide of young black men particularly, but young
okay,
people.
yeah.
That's a byproduct, not just of hip hop because it's before then, but hip hop is a precursor, is a prerequisite, is a pretext to allow that to happen. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
the thing them died.
No, I know.
Now, what I'm gonna say is that. So what we're analysing...
Man, he's close, by the way, I tried to say.
It's calm. Yeah, what we're analysing is that X's music comes in that context. And I think the best way to appreciate that legacy is not blame him for the content he put out, but like understand that it's not all positive. And we be careful of what we're intaking.
Okay. Do you think... This is kind of going backwards on the legacy question, because like, I say legacy as if like...
What, his direct personal legacy? Because I can make it personal.
No, I mean as in musically, but also in the sense that we're talking about as well, like in terms of like a societal and cultural. But specifically musically, because I don't know how much of our generation took in that his music and what he meant to the culture as well. More just in terms of like, you know, the music that we make now.
I think X has had a very big influence on
like a big influence, but then his career and then what he meant to
millions of people. Yeah, I think that's important to understand because X's legacy is obviously the aesthetic. It's the being able to have the Rough Riders itself. That's a legacy. That's an independent label technically.
Yeah.
In the 90s when that was flourishing. Do you get what I'm saying? And it became almost a major. It wasn't a major, but do you know what I mean? It was a massive corporation that had Eve on there, that had the Locks, as I said, Jada Styles, all that. Like, that's a huge conglomerate of artists that did big things. So X's legacy is his lyricism, his delivery, his voice, of course, the aesthetic, the music videos he put out, his stage show presence. Because I know everyone's seen that.
Everyone's seen that.
That one video.
Where was that actually?
I think. I don't know, you know.
No. And it was I think it was in Europe.
It was in Europe.
It was in Europe, yeah.
He performed in front of 200,000 people.
I'm still baffled when I see that
and
video.
He had the crowd engaged.
Bro, I keep looking at it like there's something. Not that I want it to be fake, but there's something so surreal about it because he's out on stage and the camera sort of pans out and you just see thousands of people out.
That he had, especially obviously it's hard to keep 200,000 people engaged. So,
bro, how can you even see past like a couple thousand?
But he had the main section of the crowd nearest to him and a little bit out engaged thoroughly.
They were bumping it. They were bumping it proper.
And X is kind of the precursor to mosh pits. You see how we now have a mosh pit culture here. X's music is a big part of that because as you saw in that video, there's mosh pits in that video. And they were mainly white youths doing it. But now that's become a standard staple of hip-hop shows is mosh pits.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of the tempo quickening and most of it being party music now. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so that then. Because you can now make a direct link to how X probably like influenced that kind of music getting pushed out and then... You know, you hear that like on live venues, and you know artists like, you know, you'll get like a Travis Scott doing that in his concerts. He'll like have the mosh pits, he'll incite riots and stuff like that. But
allegedly,
Oh, allegedly, yeah.
So,
In terms of the music that people are making now, and then you look at sort of X's legacy, you can make cases for that and indirect influences where, like, you know, over the years people have
you're
taken
talking about direct influences.
Kind of not just influences. No. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is like, what I'm trying to ask is, do you think that the children of today are gonna care much about his legacy going forward, and not just what he meant to, not just what he meant to like, not just what he meant musically, but like in terms of the culture, in terms of hip hop, like not just rap, like hip hop. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a different conversation when you're just talking about like music, because you'll always be able to argue, you hear DMX in a lot of people now, and there's no denying that.
Yeah, like,
but then talking about like when you're talking about his story and the area that he grew up in, the people that were around him at the time, and then, you know, what he was sort of bringing to that culture, like his story just in general. Like I look at it as a thing of like, you know, when people say, "Oh, you should have given them the flowers while they were still here." Now that they're gone, it's like, "Oh yeah, rest in peace, rest in peace, rest in peace," and it becomes like another story. But the people that are growing up and making music and they're influenced by him, like, is he someone that's gonna be like really, really important to the young people?
Potentially because of the street element of his story, there's a proximity, relatability factor to it. It's like, I could have been X, I was X. Do you know what I'm saying? That's why I think that's why Tupac has lived long, Biggie's lived long, because a lot of men can see themselves in there. Especially if you the new artists that come in, even though they're not necessarily new. Griselda, who've been doing their thing for years, who aren't new, I'm not even calling them new, but only new to prominence.
How long have they been around?
God knows how long. Since about 2005 probably. They've been like, and because they're all in their mid to late 30s now, they were in the 90s as teenagers listening to Wu.
To that stuff,
I remember listening to Wu in 95. That's the Conway in 99. Yeah, like that sort of time. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So people like even Pop Smoke has an influence of X with the like you can hear it.
Yeah.
And those things don't come out of nowhere.
No.
Those things don't come out of nowhere. He's obviously grew up listening to X. Not the same as like he would have grew up listening to Future. Because he's younger than us.
Yeah, he's our age.
He's our age, younger than us. So, but that influence of being from New York is there. And I think drill rap in itself comes out of that tradition of New York gangster rap. So 50... Of course, it's mainly Chicago influence, but the New York ones you hear, like Chef G, Sleepy Hollow and them, man.
I think definitely with New York, like, it will always have that sort of staple of like, we, you know, like hip hop
came from
there. So they're gonna carry the pride with that. No matter what, no matter how many years go by, like that, the generations that come and you know, turn up to make music, it's always gonna be of, you know, we're coming from this, so we're gonna respect it. Do you know what I mean?
In terms of the wider question, in terms of will hip hop live on?
Will he live on in hip hop? Is what I'm saying, because him specifically, you mentioned Tupac and Biggie. Yeah, like we had this conversation before about like people dying before their time, and then
that's
their names get sort of raised in the thing of like they will forever be ghosts. And not to take away from any of their music, I could never say like, oh, like Biggie and Tupac, you know, they wouldn't have been, you know, all of that if
you just don't know.
You don't know, innit? But because they died before their time, you don't know, it heightens their status.
I agree with that.
Do you get what I mean? DMX has had his time, and then obviously like he's gone through his period, and now he's, you know, he's passed, unfortunately. But you know, people probably would you say people talk about him in the same
the same breath, because there's the potentiality and prospect of Tupac and Biggie's like, what could have happened,
right?
Like, as if, God forbid, if this happened, if Nas went now, like Nas ain't gonna be held to the same standard by everyone else, because we felt like we seen the best of Nas. It's a huge loss, nonetheless, and he's my favorite rapper of all time, innit?
Yeah.
But to say that it would be revered the same level as Big, for example, it's like Pop Smoke. Think about the outcry of Pop Smoke is because of the potentiality of where Pop Smoke could have gone.
Yeah.
We don't know what Pop Smoke could have done. Even a King Von.
Yeah.
Which had less potential, in my opinion, than a Pop Smoke. And that's not to take away from King Von. But just to say, I think
it's in that same
Pop
batch, yeah.
Smoke could have been anything he wanted to be.
Yeah.
In terms of talent wise. Especially with that 50 element to his music, which is undeniable. Doesn't matter how. That 50, as in, I'm convinced those two are still related. Big man thing. That's what I know. Because seeing 50 show that much love to a person is weird.
That's very true. Yeah, he's not.
Have you ever seen 50 Cent show that someone that
not
love?
even like on a rude one, but he's like quite like with himself in it. Like he.
And I think it's understandable once you know the story of 50.
Yeah.
And even though there's something.
I mean, I don't know too much about his story.
Like the whole 9 times thing and all that stuff. It's like.
I heard that. Yeah, but I mean, like I'd imagine there's like more in it. Like.
Yeah, so it's just, even though I don't necessarily agree with all the 50, all the stuff 50 represents as well, I can't deny that his music didn't have a mark on me as a child. Like, that's what I grew up listening to.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So X comes out of that pantheon, but it's like he's the predecessor to that.
Yeah.
Like, rap was, I'll put it to you like this, rap was DMX's from about 98 to maybe like 01, 02. Then Jay came back. Because Jay was running rap, yeah, but it's like, how do I put it? It's not been clear. Like, you see, hip hop or rap for the last few years has been Drake's as like commercially.
Right.
Back in the day, there was loads of people, not on maybe the same level as Drake, but super duper duper stars.
Right.
A lot of men that were superstars, like Jay, Eminem, who I don't think is talent wise in the same level, but you know what I mean? That super duper duper stars.
Right.
So it's like, it's hard to define a man's era like we now have a Drake era. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Like the way you worded it, like I kind of understand what you're saying. Like Drake, like the game's a bit more. Like, would you say back then it was a bit more saturated?
Competitive.
Oh, competitive.
Because it's oversaturated now. I'm talking
about
no.
Yeah. That makes more sense.
Apart from Drake, who you naming? You're saying Kendrick and Cole, and then where do you go from there, really? Because I like Big Sean, but can you put that name in the conversation? No. I like
some people would. Some
Sean.
people would, but more because of like his actual like not commercial success, but like ability. But then commercial success is always just going to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, but that's because I started talking about the biggest entities in hip hop right now. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's why we have to say commercially. And I think X's legacy is the fact that he had everything. He had the commercial
success.
Donnie sold mad records. Like,
yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the legacy. It's like, if you don't compromise, if you can get it. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's a different conversation because obviously it's the same thing with Nipsey as well. Nipsey will get put in a legends category because he could have become a legend. His one is like close to a Tupac and Biggie because he released one album. In fact, it's if you pre-Nipsey and Biggie, quite similar, like one album released. Because people forget, people say, you see Big's got 2 albums. Big's album came out after he died. It's called Life After Death, not as a, like, it's figurative, but it's literal.
How long was Nipsey like active for?
Nipsey was active for about 10 years. The mixtapes, he flooded the streets with the mixtapes. Like, Shoebox Money, there's a bunch of others that I can't remember off the top of my head, but Nipsey was active for a solid, I'd say maybe like 8 to 10 years, maybe even longer than that. I might have even got that wrong.
Is he someone that drew? Because I'll be real as well, with Nipsey, I didn't listen to him too much, so I couldn't even like cap and try to, like say like, oh yeah, he did this, he did that. Would you say he was someone that took from that era of hip hop, like the golden era? And
but in terms of more West Coast
stuff, yeah.
Because obviously he said like, I'm the Tupac of my generation.
Okay.
Which is like, if you see that the community work he was doing, can't be against it, because stuff he was doing in the community was similar. You know what I'm saying? So he comes out of that West Coast lineage of Snoop, Puck, a little bit. I say Cube as well. Cube. Do you know what I'm saying? He was earlier, but still.
Yeah. How old was he when he passed?
Nip was 33, I think. I think
33.
let me double check that because I think Nip was 33 still. Let me double check, people. Sorry. Nipsey was. It's not telling me. It's jarring. Yeah, he was 33.
33.
He was gonna turn 34 actually in August of that year. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I'm just thinking now, like, more just so for the. I think definitely like, of the rappers that are like that were like current like now, like including Nipsey and then people that were trying to that make up the current makeup of like hip hop. Definitely oversaturated and definitely of a thing where like they have taken influences, but they also come from places where like they know themselves more. Like definitely with DMX and like his upbringing and the people that like grew up in his area as well. Like my personal opinion of it, and it's not from an educated thing, but it's just from like listening to what you've said and like just knowing like certain parts of hip hop.
The best way to end this is to say again, rest in peace to DMX. Condolences to his family yet again. And we just hope that his story is kind of, in a sense, a cautionary tale. In a sense of kind of veers people away from drugs.
Yeah.
But also that as the man himself be remembered for his music mainly and his influence in terms of his faith in God and other things like that. That should be the focus of his thing. Not his negatives, but his positives.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, man, we good.
Okay.
Yes, sir.